Imagine inheriting an empire, a vast, rapidly expanding state, but with one terrifying caveat. You have a divine expiration date.
Right. Not just a vague sense that things might end someday, but a mathematically precise, prophesied ticking clock.
Exactly. 30 years. That is the exact window given for the ideal state to survive before it collapses into what the sources describe as a biting kingship.
And living with that known deadline, watching those years tick by from 2 to 12 to 24, it creates this intense psychological pressure cooker.
It fundamentally alters how we have to look at the early history of the Islamic Empire.
It really does. And that tension, the reality of that 30-year window, is the central thesis of the highly meticulous research document we're analyzing today.
Right.
The paper is titled Waqi-i Karbala ka Haqwe ki Pas Manzar 72 Sahih Isnad al-Hadith ki Roshani Main.
Which translates to the true historical background of the Karbala tragedy in the light of 72 authenticated narrations.
Yes, and the author's methodology here is, well, it's incredibly strict. It completely bypasses all unverified historical lore, emotional storytelling, or sectarian narratives.
It relies strictly on the authenticated texts.
Exclusively. It uses narrations from Sunni texts that have verified chains of transmission. Sahih Isnad al-Hadith. And these are authenticated by major scholars like Sheikh al-Albani and Sheikh Zubair al-Izai.
So if an event or a quote isn't backed by a rigorously verified hadith, it doesn't exist in this timeline.
It does not exist in this paper.
Yeah.
Zero outside hallucination or fluff.
Before we move forward, I need to speak directly to you, the listener, with a crucial and explicit impartiality disclaimer.
This is very important.
The source material we are unpacking today deals with some of the most politically and religiously charged historical events in human history. It involves the most prominent companions of the Prophet Muhammad.
Right. Figures whose legacies are foundational to the Islamic faith. We're talking about Ali, Uthman, Aisha, and Muawiyah.
And we, as your hosts, are not taking sides. We are not endorsing any theological, sectarian, or political viewpoints. Our sole objective is to impartially report, analyze, and synthesize the exact text provided in this research document.
We are looking at the data presented purely through the lens of objective academic analysis.
And that data presents a deeply complex mapping of administrative, political, and theological fault lines.
Yeah, the mission of this document is to trace how the designated 30-year period known as the rightly guided caliphate, which was a leadership modeled strictly on prophethood, how that gradually eroded.
It meticulously tracks the transition into monarchy.
Exactly. It explores the internal friction that created a highly volatile landscape, which inevitably culminated in the tragedy of Karbala.
Let's return to that prophetic ticking clock, because the document places it at the very foundation of this historical timeline.
It really is the baseline. It isn't just a retroactive historical observation. It's presented as a direct prophecy made by the prophet regarding the political future of the Muslim community.
How does the text establish this?
The text opens with a recurring narration. According to a hadith in Musnad Ahmad, narrated by Safina, who was a freed slave of the prophet stated explicitly, the caliphate will remain for 30 years, then after that, it will become kingship.
The caliphate will remain for 30 years.
Yes. And the paper reinforces this by citing Sunan an-Nasai al-Kubra, hadith 8155, and Sunan Abu Dawud, 4646. Both of these are graded Sahih by Sheikh al-Albani and Sheikh Zubair al-Izai.
So the authenticity is locked in.
Totally locked in. In these texts, Safina reiterates the prophecy. He says, the caliphate or prophethood will last for 30 years, then Allah will give the kingdom to whom he wishes.
The phrase biting kingship or monarchy, it's such a visceral descriptor.
It really is.
It implies a leadership that holds onto power fiercely, maybe ruthlessly, which is entirely distinct from the consultative, spiritually grounded model of the caliphate.
Right.
But what fascinates me is how the companions themselves treated this 30-year figure. They didn't view it as a metaphor.
Not at all. Safina actually breaks down the math for his students to prove the prophecy's exact fulfillment.
The mathematical precision is amazing.
It's paramount in his teaching. He tells the narrator, Sa'id, to literally count the years of governance.
Right, to do the math right there.
Yeah, he lists Abu Bakr for 2 years, Umar for 10 years, Uthman for 12 years, and Ali for 6 years.
And when you tally those figures, taking into account the brief 6-month reign of Ali's son Hassan, it lands squarely on the 30-year mark.
Squarely on 30. The prophecy is presented not as a mystical allegory, but as a precise historical blueprint.
Knowing that this blueprint existed, it really changes how we view the actions of these leaders.
Oh, absolutely.
If you are Umar or Uthman, you are operating an expanding state apparatus knowing that the structural integrity of your governance model has a divine expiration date.
Right, and decades later, that math becomes an ideological battleground. The text details a specific interaction where this timeline is used as a weapon against the ruling class.
Yeah, the interaction you were referring to is documented in Sunan Abu Dawud and Jami at-Tirmidhi.
Yes, Said, the student, mentions to Safina that the Umayyads, the dynasty ruling the empire at that time, claimed that the caliphate rightfully belonged to them.
They were attempting to legitimize their dynastic rule by co-opting the title of caliphate.
Exactly, and Safina's reaction to that claim is explosive.
He doesn't just offer a polite historical correction.
No, he views it as a fundamental corruption of the prophet's timeline. The text notes that Safina replied in a state of extreme anger.
What were his exact words?
His exact words were, Banu Zarqa have lied. Rather, they are from the harsh kings, and their first king is Muawiyah.
Banu Zarqa.
Yeah, referring to the blue-eyed ones of Banu Marwan, which was a pointed descriptor for the ruling class.
So Safina is fiercely defending the integrity of the 30-year timeline.
He is. He insists that Muawiyah was not a rightly guided caliph, regardless of the titles he claimed, but merely the first of the monarchs that the prophet had warned the community about.
This establishes our parameters so clearly. We have a 30-year window of ideal governance that is fated to collapse.
And the document argues that the first catastrophic fracture in this period, the moment the structural integrity of the state suffered permanent damage, occurred with the assassination of the second caliph, Umar.
And the sources use a chilling, profound metaphor to describe this moment, the breaking of a door.
To understand the weight of Umar's death, the paper examines a profoundly layered conversation recorded in Sahih Bukhari 7096 and Sahih Muslim 7268.
Umar is sitting with his companions.
Right, and he poses the theological question. He asks if anyone remembers the specific hadith of the prophet regarding fitna.
Now, fitna is a complex Arabic term, right?
Very complex. It encompasses trials, tribulations, civil strife, or deep societal turmoil.
Hudayfa bin al-Yaman, a companion known for being the keeper of the prophet's secrets, speaks up.
He does, but he initially misunderstands the scale of Umar's question. Hudayfa mentions the everyday trials a man faces, the fitna regarding his family, his wealth, his children, or his neighbors.
And he explains that these daily spiritual frictions are expiated by routine prayer, fasting, and charity.
Exactly. But Umar immediately clarifies that he isn't asking about personal everyday trials.
What does he say?
He specifies, I am asking about the turmoil that will crash and wave like the severe waves of the sea.
Wow.
Yeah, Umar is inquiring about a catastrophic state-level crisis, a social unraveling that threatens to drown the entire community.
Hudayfa's response to this is meant to be comforting, but it carries a terrifying underlying implication.
He tells Umar, O leader of the believers, you have nothing to fear from it. There is a closed door between you and that turmoil.
The metaphor of the door is central to the paper's thesis here. A closed door suggests a barrier that is currently functioning, holding back the sea of chaos.
But Umar understands the mechanics of prophecy. He asks a clarifying question that shifts the entire tone of the narration.
He asks, will that door be broken or opened?
Right. The distinction between opened and broken is the hinge upon which the rest of Islamic history turns.
Because if a door is simply open, the turmoil can flow in, but eventually someone can push the door shut again. Order can be restored. The mechanism remains intact.
Precisely the analytical lens the text demands. Hudayfa replies, rather, it will be broken.
Broken.
Yes. And Umar, internalizing the finality of that word, responds that it will never be closed again.
The document explains that the followers later asked Hudayfa if Umar knew the true identity of this door.
And Hudayfa confirmed that Umar knew it as certainly as he knew that tomorrow follows today. The door holding back the devastating waves of civil strife was Umar himself.
So Umar's violent assassination literally broke the door.
It did. It wasn't a peaceful transition of power. It was a murder that fundamentally shattered the barrier holding back political, tribal, and social chaos.
The permanent structural damage to the state had been inflicted.
Yet, even knowing he was the door and that his death would unleash this fitna, the sources show Umar attempting to engineer a transition that might mitigate the immediate damage.
According to Sahih Bukhari 3700, on his deathbed, Umar forms a specific consultative council known as a shura.
This shura is a fascinating piece of administrative engineering. Umar doesn't just name a successor.
Right, he curates a six-man council.
Consisting of Uthman, Ali, Talha, Zubair, Saad bin Abi Waqqas, and Abdurrahman bin Auf.
And the selection of these six men is highly deliberate.
Very much so. Umar explicitly states that he considers no one more entitled to the caliphate than these six individuals, noting specifically that the Prophet was pleased with them until he died.
He establishes this shura to ensure that the transition of power remains a consultative process.
Right, rooted in mutual agreement rather than force or dynastic inheritance. And he warns the community that anyone who attempts to undermine this consultative process is effectively an enemy of the state.
The shura functions as intended, at least initially. The council deliberates and ultimately selects Uthman as the third caliph, with Ali being the first to step forward and pledge his allegiance.
However, we are now entering the 12-year reign of Uthman, and the ticking clock is accelerating.
The broken door has let the water in.
And the document tackles the rising internal tensions of this era with remarkable bluntness.
The bluntness is entirely necessary because the research paper actively dismantles a highly popular traditional historical narrative regarding Uthman's era.
It does. In many later historical accounts, the severe political unrest and the eventual rebellion against Uthman are blamed almost entirely on a singular, shadowy external figure named Abdullah bin Saba.
He is often portrayed as a Jewish conspirator who infiltrated the Muslim community solely to sow discord.
But the document calls that narrative a fabricated distraction. It references the extensive work of Sheikh Hafiz Zubair Alizai, stating that relying on the Abdullah bin Saba conspiracy theory is a direct result of ignorance regarding authentic hadiths and verifiable historical facts.
The paper insists we look inward at valid internal grievances.
Exactly, primarily concerning the administrative actions of the Umayyad governors that Uthman appointed to run the provinces.
The reliance on an external scapegoat like Abdullah bin Saba is a well-documented historiographical phenomenon.
It is. When later generations possess an intense reverence for their founding figures, it becomes psychologically and theologically painful to reconcile that reverence with the reality of bitter, sometimes violent political failures among those very founders.
It's the psychological need to protect the founding myth, right?
Yeah.
If you can blame an outsider, a boogeyman, then the founders remain pure. The system didn't fail, it was sabotaged.
But this research paper argues that clinging to that comfortable myth actually obscures the true diagnostic lessons of the era.
The authentic sources demand we examine the real documented friction among the companions themselves.
And the paper provides stark, authenticated examples of this friction, particularly the administrative and theological clashes between Uthman and Ali.
A primary example cited is the dispute over Hajj Tamatu. We need to define Hajj Tamatu to understand the stakes of this disagreement. It involves the rituals of pilgrimage to Mecca.
Correct. Hajj Tamatu is the practice of combining the lesser pilgrimage, the Umrah, with the major pilgrimage, the Hajj, during the same journey, but entering a state of consecration, ihram, for each separately.
And in Sahih Muslim 2964, the text details a confrontation at a place called Asfan.
Uthman, acting in his capacity as caliph, is actively forbidding the people from performing Hajj Tamatu, likely for administrative or logistical reasons concerning the influx of pilgrims.
But Ali witnesses the caliph forbidding this practice and immediately challenges the ruling in public.
He does. Ali explicitly declares his intention to perform both rituals, announcing loudly, Labbaik bi umratin wa hajjana.
Meaning, here I am for Umrah and Hajj.
Yes. He then states his reasoning clearly. He says, I will not abandon the sunnah of the Prophet for the statement of any person.
Ali is drawing an absolute, unyielding line in the sand regarding the limits of state power.
He is establishing that administrative authority, even that of the caliph, cannot override or alter an established prophetic tradition.
The preservation of the Prophet's exact practice supersedes any political or administrative mandate.
Right. And this ideological friction bleeds directly into the realm of criminal justice. The paper highlights an incident that shatters the idealized image of early provincial governance.
It involves Walid bin Uqba.
The narration regarding Walid bin Uqba is drawn from Sahih Muslim 4457. Walid was Uthman's half-brother, and Uthman had appointed him as the governor of Kufa, a major garrison city in Iraq.
And the Hadith documents a shocking event.
Yes. Walid led the morning Fajr prayer for the congregation. Now, the Fajr prayer is strictly 2 units of prayer. However, Walid was heavily intoxicated with wine.
He was drunk leading the prayer.
Heavily intoxicated. After leading the 2 units, he turned to the congregation and sluggishly asked, should I pray more for you?
The visual is staggering. The provincial governor, the representative of the caliph, is so drunk that he loses count of the most foundational daily ritual.
And the text notes he literally vomited in the mosque.
Wow.
Witnesses immediately traveled to the capital to testify to Uthman that his governor had been drinking wine, which is a clear violation of Islamic law.
This places Uthman in a severe administrative bind. The witnesses are credible, the violation is public, and the offender is his own half-brother and appointee.
Uthman summons Ali and tells him to carry out the prescribed punishment for drinking wine.
Ali delegates the physical task to his son Hassan.
But Hassan is deeply frustrated by the nepotism that created this crisis in the first place.
Hassan's response is incredibly sharp. He says, "Let the one who tasted the heat of its power taste its bitterness."
He is essentially telling his father that Uthman should be the one to clean up the mess caused by his own corrupt governor. The family of Ali shouldn't have to act as the enforcers for Uthman's administrative failures.
Despite Hassan's refusal, Ali recognizes the paramount importance of upholding the law, regardless of political discomfort.
Ali orders Abdullah bin Jafar to carry out the whipping. As the lashes are administered, Ali counts them strictly.
When the count reaches 40, Ali orders him to stop.
Right, Ali explains his adherence to the exact precedent. He states that the Prophet whipped 40 times for this offense. Abu Bakr whipped 40, and while Umar had increased the punishment to 80 lashes during his reign as a deterrent, 40 is the original sunnah, and therefore it is more beloved to him.
Ali stepping in to enforce the 40 lashes isn't merely about punishing a drunkard. It is a profound public assertion that the law applies equally to the ruling class.
The Caliph's family is not immune. The text uses these incidents to frame Uthman's struggle not as malicious corruption, but as tragic human administrative error, particularly regarding his inability to control his Umayyad relatives.
To contextualize Uthman's tragic position, the research paper introduces a profound prophetic protocol, a dream narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas, recorded in both Sahih Bukhari 7046 and Sahih Muslim 59228.
The dream of the ropes stretching to heaven.
Let's walk through that.
A man comes to the Prophet and details a vivid dream. He sees a rope stretching from the earth up to heaven. In the dream, the Prophet grasps the rope and climbs it.
He is followed by a second man, understood to be Abu Bakr, who grasps it and climbs.
Then a third man, Umar, grasps it and climbs. But when the fourth man, Uthman, grasps the rope breaks.
But the narration notes that the rope is subsequently tied back together for him, and he's then able to climb it.
Right. Abu Bakr, who is present when the dream is recounted, immediately asks the Prophet for permission to interpret it.
Abu Bakr explains that the rope represents the religion of truth. Grasping it and climbing signifies adherence to that truth.
But when he finishes his interpretation, Abu Bakr asks the Prophet if his analysis was correct.
And the Prophet's response is highly constrained. He tells Abu Bakr, "You were partly right and partly wrong."
Abu Bakr practically begs the Prophet to reveal where his interpretation failed, pleading, "By Allah, tell me what I got wrong."
But the Prophet flatly refuses to elaborate, telling Abu Bakr, "Do not swear."
The Prophet's refusal to elaborate leaves a haunting ambiguity. But the text interprets the breaking of the rope as a clear prophecy of Uthman's tragic end.
The broken rope symbolizes the collapse of his worldly administration and his eventual assassination by rebels who besiege his home.
The fact that the rope is tied back together for him signifies his ultimate spiritual salvation. His violent death serves as an expiation for his administrative weaknesses, allowing him to ascend spiritually despite the political catastrophe on earth.
And that catastrophe brings us to the next critical phase of the timeline. The ticking clock has hit 24 years.
Uthman has been assassinated in Medina. The door that Umar represented is now fully shattered.
The sea of turmoil rushes in, and Ali inherits a caliphate that is immediately, uncontrollably engulfed in civil war.
The transition of power to Ali is chaotic. The text references Sahih Bukhari 3700, reiterating that following Uthman's death, no one possessed a more legitimate claim or was more entitled to the caliphate than Ali.
The remaining companions in Medina pledged their allegiance to him.
However, the sheer trauma of Uthman's assassination fractures the empire. The demand for immediate retribution for Uthman's blood supersedes the call for unity, sparking massive internal conflicts, specifically the battles of Jamal and Siffin.
The paper dissects the Battle of Jamal first. This conflict pits Ali's central forces against an army mobilized by the Prophet's widow, Aisha, who is accompanied by the prominent companions Talha and Zubair.
Their stated goal was to seek justice for Uthman, but the political reality resulted in an armed march toward Basra.
The document highlights a specific, deeply unsettling moment during this march, citing Musnad Ahmad, Hadith 24758.
As Aisha and her army reach a specific watering hole belonging to a tribe called Banu Amir, the local dogs begin to bark aggressively at her.
Aisha pauses and asks her guides for the name of the location.
They inform her that it is the water of Hawab. Upon hearing that name, the text records her immediate visceral reaction. She states, "I must return."
She wants to turn the entire army around because the name Hawab triggers the memory of a terrifying prophecy.
Exactly. The text quotes the prophet, delivering a stark warning to his wives years earlier. He said, "I wish I knew which of you will be the one riding a camel with excessive hair on its face, at whom the dogs of Hawab will bark, and around her right and left there will be massive killing. She will narrowly escape."
The psychological horror of that realization is profound. Aisha doesn't just remember a warning, she suddenly recognizes that she is actively fulfilling the role of the tragic subject in a prophecy of mass slaughter.
She's the one on the camel. The dogs of Hawab are barking at her.
The document relies on commentary from Sheikh al-Albani to analyze this moment. He emphasizes that Aisha's participation in this march was an ijtihadi error.
We should unpack the concept of ijtihad here. It's a fundamental principle in Islamic jurisprudence.
Right.
Ijtihad refers to the independent reasoning or the exertion of a scholar's mental faculty to find a solution to a legal or theological question.
If a qualified scholar exercises ijtihad and is correct, they receive a double reward.
If they exert their effort and arrive at an incorrect conclusion, they still receive a single reward for their sincere effort, but the error itself is recognized.
Al-Bani frames Aisha's march as a sincere, well-intentioned ijtihad aimed at reconciliation and justice, which tragically resulted in catastrophic error.
And the sources confirm that Aisha herself ultimately view it as a grave error. The text cites Sahih Bukhari 1391, detailing her deathbed requests.
She explicitly asks not to be buried in the chamber next to the Prophet, Abu Bakr, and Umar.
Instead, she requests to be buried in the al-Baqi cemetery alongside the other wives of the Prophet.
The Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba provides the heartbreaking context for this request. Aisha explicitly states she feels unworthy of being buried next to the Prophet because she committed a new action after his death.
A direct, regretful reference to her leadership role in the civil war that resulted in the Battle of Jamal.
It's a devastating portrait of regret. But the civil war does not end at Jamal. It metastasizes into the grueling Battle of Siffin,
where Ali's forces confront Muawiyah, the powerful governor of Syria, who has refused to pledge allegiance to Ali until Uthman's killers are punished.
In analyzing Siffin, the research paper zeroes in on one specific casualty, elevating a single man into the ultimate theological compass for the entire conflict, Ammar bin Yasir.
Ammar bin Yasir is utilized by the text as the definitive litmus test for truth in an era saturated with conflicting claims.
The paper repeatedly anchors its analysis on a famous prophecy recorded in Sahih Bukhari 28:12.
Decades earlier, while the early Muslims were physically building the Prophet's mosque in Medina, the Prophet was wiping dust from Ommar's head and delivered a highly specific prediction.
The Prophet said, "Alas, Ammar will be killed by a rebellious group. Ammar will be inviting them to paradise, and they will be inviting him to the hellfire."
The linguistic clarity of that prophecy is inescapable. The group that kills Ammar is explicitly labeled a rebellious group whose actions invite to hellfire.
This is not a vague political critique. It is a profound theological condemnation.
So we move forward in time to the plains of Siffin. Ammar bin Yasir, now an elderly man, is fighting in the ranks of Ali's army.
And during the brutal combat, he is killed by soldiers belonging to Muawiyah's Syrian forces.
The text cites Musnad Ahmad 17929 to document the immediate fallout of his death within the Umayyad command structure.
The reaction of bin al-As, a brilliantly strategic commander serving under Muawiyah, is incredibly telling.
When Ammar is informed that Ammar has fallen, he doesn't celebrate the death of an enemy combatant. He panics.
The text describes him jumping up, repeatedly reciting the Quranic verse of tragedy, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun,
meaning, we belong to Allah, and to Him we shall return. And he rushes to Muawiyah's tent shouting, Ammar has been killed.
Ammar bin al-As isn't reacting to a tactical loss, he's reacting to a theological disaster.
He knows the Hadith. He knows exactly what killing Ammar signifies for their faction.
Ammar directly confronts Muawiyah with the prophecy, stating, I heard the messenger of Allah saying, a rebellious group will kill him.
Ammar is terrified because the prophecy has just mathematically proven that their Syrian army is the rebellious faction inviting to hellfire.
This confrontation exposes the mechanics of political spin and the mental gymnastics required to maintain authority when reality contradicts your narrative.
Confronted with an authentic prophetic condemnation, Muwatta cannot simply ignore the Hadith, so he attempts to aggressively reinterpret it.
The text details Muawiyah's enraged response. He snaps back at Umar, saying, "Are you going to slip in your own urine? Did we kill him? It was Ali and his companions who killed him by bringing him and throwing him in front of our spears."
He brought him to the spears. It is a stunning, almost audacious piece of rhetoric.
Muawiyah is arguing that by deploying Ammar to the front lines, Ali is the true murderer, thus attempting to shift the theological blame of the prophecy onto Ali's faction.
The document does not let this rhetorical spin stand. It includes severe commentary from the Hanafi scholar Imam Badr al-Din al-Aini, who utterly demolishes Muawiyah's excuse.
Al-Aini argues that logic dictates the killer is the one who wields the weapon, not the commander who deploys the soldier.
Furthermore, al-Aini asserts that Muwatta cannot claim this conflict was an error in judgment, a mistake in ijtihad, because the Prophet's text regarding Ammar was absolute and unambiguous.
The paper utilizes the death of Ammar to definitively conclude that Ali's position was the side of truth and rightful authority.
The empire is now cleaved in two, exhausted and bathed in blood, but the trauma of Siffin births something entirely new and terrifying.
When Ali, seeking to stop the endless slaughter of Muslims by Muslims, agrees to human arbitration with Muawiyah, a massive faction of his own army violently rebels against the decision.
This brings us to the emergence of the Khawari, or Kharijites, an extremist splinter group that permanently altered the DNA of Islamic political history.
The Kharijites represent the weaponization of hyperpiety, and true to the methodology of this research paper, their emergence is mapped directly back to a prophetic warning.
The text cites the prophecy of Du al-Quwaisira from Sahih Bukhari 6933.
The incident with Du al-Quwaisir occurred while the prophet was distributing the spoils of war. This man approaches the prophet and arrogantly commands him to be just.
The sheer audacity to command the prophet of God to be just reveals a foundational arrogance masked as religious strictness.
The prophet responds with a chilling prediction about the ideological descendants of this man.
He warns that a group will emerge whose outward displays of religious devotion, their continuous prayer and rigorous fasting, will be so intense that the companions themselves would view their own worship as insignificant in comparison.
But that outward piety is a hollow shell. The prophet warns they will shoot through the religion just as an arrow shoots through the prey.
The metaphor of the arrow is brilliant. An arrow moves through the body of the prey so fast that it exits clean, retaining none of the blood or meat.
The prophet is describing a group that passes rapidly through the mechanics of religion without absorbing any of its actual substance, mercy, or deeper understanding.
And he specifically noted, they will appear at a time of difference among the people, precisely the moment of the arbitration at Siffin.
The Kharijites splinter off, numbering in the thousands, and declare that Ali has committed a grave sin by allowing human men to arbitrate a conflict, claiming that judgment belongs solely to God.
They excommunicate Ali and anyone who supports the arbitration.
Before engaging them in combat, Ali sends the brilliant scholar Abdullah bin Abbas to their camp to attempt a dialogue.
The intellectual showdown between Ibn Abbas and the 6,000 Kharijites is one of the most remarkable events documented in the paper, cited from Sunan an-Nasai al-Kubra, 18575.
Ibn Abbas approaches the debate meticulously.
He dresses in fine Yemeni clothing, combs his hair, and walks into their camp. It's a visual contrast to their harsh austerity. He doesn't begin by lecturing them. He asks them to clearly articulate their specific grievances against Ali.
They present three main ideological objections. Let's analyze how Ibn Abbas dismantles each one, because it is essentially a masterclass in confronting theological extremism with contextual logic.
Their first objection is their core slogan. Ali used human arbitrators instead of God's law. Quoting the Quranic phrase, the decision is only for Allah.
Ibn Abbas recognizes that they are using a true statement to support a false conclusion through extreme literalism.
He refutes them using the Quran itself, proving that God actually commands human arbitration in specific scenarios.
He cites Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 95, where Allah mandates that two just men should act as arbitrators to determine the penalty if someone kills a game animal while in the sacred state of Ihram.
He takes a mundane legal ruling, hunting violations during a pilgrimage, and uses it as a logical lever.
Right.
He then compounds it by citing Surah An-Nisa, verse 35, regarding severe marital disputes, where Allah commands the appointment of one human arbitrator from the husband's family and one from the wife's family to seek reconciliation.
Ibn Abbas then poses a devastating rhetorical question. I swear by Allah, is it more important and superior to use human arbitration to reform the affairs of the Muslims and prevent mass bloodshed, or to arbitrate over the value of a dead rabbit or a woman's marital affair?
It's an inescapable logical trap. He exposes their literalism as intellectually shallow.
What was their second objection?
The Kharijites argued that Ali fought Aisha at Jamal and Muawiyah at Siffin, but he refused to take spoils of war or capture the defeated prisoners as slaves.
Their rigid binary logic was this. If the opponents were unbelievers, then capturing their wealth and women was lawful. If they were believers, then fighting them in the first place was unlawful. Therefore, by fighting but not taking slaves, Ali had violated the law of war.
This logic is horrifying because it strips away all nuance of a civil war.
How does Ibn Abbas dismantle this?
He forces them to confront the grotesque reality of their own logic. He asks them, do you want to take your mother Aisha as a captive and make her lawful for yourselves like other slave women? He then explains the theological trap therein. If you say yes, we will enslave her, you become disbelievers for violating the sanctity of the prophet's widow. If you try to escape by saying she is not your mother, you also become disbelievers because the Quran explicitly dictates in Surah Al-Asab, the prophet is closer to the believers than their own selves, and his wives are their mothers.
You are trapped between two massive misguidances.
He uses the foundational text to corner them so completely that any answer they give renders them outside the fold of the faith they claim to be protecting. It's brilliant.
And their final objection?
Their third grievance was procedural but highly symbolic. During the drafting of the peace treaty with Muawiyah, Ali agreed to erase his formal title, Amir al-Mu'minin, Commander of the Faithful, from the document to appease the Syrian delegation.
The Kharijites argued that if Ali voluntarily erased his title as Commander of the Faithful, he must logically be the commander of the disbelievers.
Ibn Abbas counters this by invoking the ultimate historical precedent, the actions of the Prophet himself at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah.
Exactly. Ibn Abbas reminds them that when the Prophet was negotiating peace with the pagan Quraysh at Hudaybiyah, the pagans refused to sign a document that referred to him as Muhammad, the messenger of Allah.
They argued that if they believed he was the messenger, they wouldn't be fighting him.
To secure the peace, the Prophet ordered Ali, who ironically was acting as the scribe, to erase the prophetic title and simply write Muhammad bin Abdullah.
Ibn Abbas delivers the final blow. By Allah, the messenger of Allah is far better than Ali, yet he erased his own title for the sake of peace, and doing so did not diminish his prophethood one bit.
The strategy employed by Ibn Abbas is deeply relevant even today when discussing de-radicalization. You cannot fight zealous extremism purely with force. You must dismantle the flawed scriptural logic that fuels the zealotry.
And the text notes that this intellectual intervention was highly successful. 2,000 Karaite fighters repented on the spot and abandoned the rebellion.
However, the remaining thousands refused to yield their fanaticism, and Ali was ultimately forced to engage them militarily at the Battle of Naran.
Yet even in warfare, the paper notes Ali's strict adherence to legal categorization. According to the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba 39097, when asked about the status of the Khawarij, Ali explicitly stated they were not disbelievers, nor were they hypocrites. They were simply internal rebels who had violently transgressed against the state and had to be stopped.
Despite Ali's efforts to hold the fracturing empire together, the 30-year clock finally runs out. Ali is assassinated while leading prayers by a Kharijite extremist.
His son Hassan briefly assumes leadership, but steps down to prevent further slaughter.
The caliphate is officially dead. Muawiyah consolidates absolute power in Damascus, and the prophesied era of kingship formally begins.
And with this new dynastic kingship comes a chilling, state-sponsored propaganda campaign designed to rewrite history.
The research paper identifies this campaign as a grave innovation. To legitimize the new Umayyad power structure and cement the narrative that their dynasty was the rightful authority, a state mandate was issued.
The mandate required that Ali bin Abi Talib be actively cursed from the pulpits during the Friday sermons across the empire.
We have to understand the mechanics of power here. In the 7th century, the Friday sermon wasn't just a religious homily, it was the mass media of the state.
It was how news, policy, and official narratives were broadcast to the population.
By mandating the cursing of Ali on the pulpits, the state is attempting to brainwash a new generation into viewing the fourth caliph as an enemy.
But the old guard, the senior companions who actually lived alongside the Prophet and Ali, push back fiercely against this revisionism.
The resistance of the senior companions is heavily documented. The text cites a powerful confrontation recorded in Sahih Muslim 6220 involving Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas.
Muawiyah directly commands Sa'ad to participate in cursing Ali.
Sa'ad delivers an absolute refusal. He informs Muawiyah that he will never curse Ali as long as he remembers three unparalleled virtues that the Prophet specifically bestowed upon Ali.
Sa'ad is invoking historical realities that Muawiyah cannot deny. Let's break down the three virtues Sa'ad lists, because they are foundational to understanding Ali's theological status. The first refers to the expedition of Tabuk.
Yes. During the grueling military expedition to Tabuk, the Prophet left Ali behind in Medina to manage the affairs of the city and the family.
Ali was distressed at being left behind from the campaign. The Prophet consoled him by establishing a profound analogy, stating, "You are to me in the position that Aaron was to Moses, except there is no prophet after me."
Sa'ad is reminding Muawiyah that the Prophet likened his relationship with Ali to that of the two great prophets of the Exodus.
The second virtue Sa'ad lists occurred at the Battle of Khaybar, a critical siege against a heavily fortified stronghold.
The siege at Khaybar had stalled for days. The Prophet then made a monumental declaration to the army. "Tomorrow I will give the flag to a man who loves Allah and his messenger, and Allah and his messenger love him."
The next morning, the Prophet summoned Ali, who was suffering from an eye ailment, cured his eyes, handed him the flag, and Ali led the forces to victory.
Sa'ad is pointing out that Ali's love for God and God's love for Ali was publicly guaranteed by the Prophet.
And the third virtue involves the event of Mubahala. This requires some context, as it's a very specific theological mechanism.
A mubahala is a mutual imprecation, a spiritual showdown, where two opposing parties in a deep religious dispute gather their closest family members and pray for God's curse to fall upon whoever is lying.
When a delegation of Christians from Najran engaged in a theological dispute with the Prophet regarding the nature of Jesus, the Quran commanded a mubahala. The Prophet was instructed to bring his family.
He called Ali, his daughter Fatima, and his grandsons Hassan and Hussein. He wrapped them together and declared, "O Allah, these are my family."
Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas is laying out an impenetrable defense. He's essentially telling the king, "You are asking me to curse a man who was Aaron to the prophets Moses, who was explicitly declared to be loved by God, and who was chosen to represent the prophet's own soul and family in a divine showdown."
The text notes that confronted with this unassailable list, Muawiyah remained silent and did not speak to Sa'ad about the matter again while in Medina.
But the state propaganda continued in the provinces, leading to even more dramatic public confrontations. The document recounts an incident from Sunan Abu Dawud 4648 involving Sa'id bin Zayd, one of the earliest converts to Islam.
Sa'id bin Zayd walks into the main mosque in Kufa, only to find the Umayyad governor, Mughira bin Shuba, hosting a session where state orators are actively cursing Ali.
Sa'id is infuriated by this blatant corruption of the pulpit. He interrupts the governor's session and employs a unique, incredibly powerful rhetorical strategy to protect Ali's legacy.
Sa'id publicly narrates the Hadith of the 10 Promised Paradise.
This is a famous narration where the Prophet explicitly named 10 specific men who were guaranteed entrance into heaven. Sa'id lists them loud and clear for the congregation to hear: Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Talha, Zubair, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, Abdurrahman bin Auf, Abu Ubaidah, and finally Sa'id names himself as the 10th.
It's an overwhelming flex of spiritual authority. Sa'id is weaponizing his own undisputed, divinely guaranteed status to humiliate the governor and shelter Ali.
He is demonstrating that the state is actively cursing a man whom the Prophet already confirmed is a resident of paradise.
The Umayyads also attempted more subtle forms of propaganda, such as trying to weaponize a nickname to demean Ali's memory. Sahih Muslim 6229 details an interaction where the Umayyad governor of Medina pressures a companion named Sal bin Sa'd.
Saul refuses to curse Ali. The governor, looking for any concession, demands that Saul at least say, "May Allah curse Abu Turab."
Abu Turab translates to the man of dust or father of dust. Out of context, the Umayyads tried to spin it as a degrading slur, painting Ali as lowly or dirty.
But Saul exposes the tragic irony of the governor's demand. He reveals that Abu Turab was not an insult. It was, in fact, the most affectionate nickname Ali possessed, given to him directly by the Prophet.
Saul narrates the origin story. The Prophet had entered his daughter Fatima's house and found Ali was not there, having gone to sleep in the mosque after a minor disagreement.
The Prophet went to the mosque, found Ali sleeping on the ground with his cloak slipped off, covered in dust.
The Prophet knelt down, wiped the dust from Ali's back with his own hands, and affectionately woke him by saying, "Get up, O Abu Turab."
Saul informs the governor that Ali loved no name more than this one, completely neutralizing the state's attempt to use it as a weapon.
The weaponization of the pulpit was a mechanism of control, but it was just one symptom of a broader systemic shift.
The caliphate's strict adherence to prophetic tradition was gone, and the new Umayyad monarchy began blatantly altering established Islamic economic and social laws to suit the needs of a sprawling, luxurious empire.
The research paper is adamant in linking the era of kingship with the alteration of the Sunnah, the Prophet's established practice. The text provides specific, authenticated examples of how the monarchy prioritized its own economic opinions over prophetic mandates.
A clear example involves the Zakat al-Fitr.
Zakat al-Fitr is the obligatory charity given at the end of the fasting month of Ramadan. It's meant to ensure that even the poorest members of society have food for the Eid celebration.
In Sahih Muslim 2284, the companion Abu Sa'id al-Khudri explains the original strict mechanism. During the Prophet's time, the mandate was to give one full saw, a specific volume measurement, of staple food, such as dates or barley.
However, when Muawiyah consolidated power, he delivered a sermon unilaterally changing this mandate. He decreed that half a saw of Syrian wheat was economically equivalent to a full saw of dates.
He is altering a religious tax based on fluctuating imperial economics. Syrian wheat was considered a superior, more expensive commodity in the expanding empire.
Exactly. He applied administrative economic logic to a fixed theological ritual.
Abu Sa'id al-Khudri viewed this as an unacceptable innovation and openly defied the king, declaring, "As for me, I will continue to give it exactly as I used to give it during the lifetime of the Messenger of Allah."
This tension over economic laws extended to the very currency of the empire. The text details a clash over the rules governing the sale of precious metals.
Sahih Muslim 4061 records an incident where Muawiyah ordered an official to sell silver vessels captured as war booty in exchange for paying people's salaries.
Ubadah bin Samit, a highly respected senior companion, witnessed this transaction and intervened publicly.
He announced that the Prophet had strictly forbidden the exchange of gold for gold or silver for silver, unless the transaction was of exactly equal weight and conducted hand-to-hand on the spot.
Ubadah declared that any discrepancy in weight, even if exchanging raw silver for crafted silver vessels, constituted riba, usury, which is strictly forbidden.
The people, upon hearing a senior companion invoke the Prophet's strict financial laws, immediately returned the silver vessels, effectively halting the state's economic transaction.
This public defiance infuriated Muawiyah. He used his pulpit to complain about individuals narrating hadiths that contradicted his administrative policies.
Ubadah bin Samit responded by standing up and repeating the hadith loudly, declaring fearlessly that he did not care if his adherence to the truth rubbed Muawiyah's nose in the dirt. The laws of the Prophet could not be bypassed for state convenience.
Beyond economics, the era of kingship also ushered in a visible shift toward royal luxury, abandoning the austerity of the caliphate.
Sunan Abu Dawud 4131 describes an incredibly tense scene in Muawiyah's own court. A companion named Miqdam bin Madakaribub travels to the capital and confronts the king directly.
Miqdam forces Muawiyah into a theological corner by asking him to publicly confirm certain prophetic prohibitions. He makes Muawiyah admit that the Prophet strictly forbade men from wearing gold, wearing silk, and sitting on the skins of predatory animals like tigers.
And once the king admits these prohibitions exist, Miqdam springs the trap.
Yes. Miqdam looks around the opulent court and states, "By Allah, I see all of these things in your house, O Muawiyah."
He forces the king to acknowledge his own hypocrisy and violation of the Sunnah in real time.
The sheer courage required to walk into an absolute monarch's court and call him a hypocrite to his face is staggering. But if we step back and think about the emotional and psychological toll this era took on the old guard, the companions who remembered the simplicity, the strict justice, and the spiritual purity of the Prophet's time, it must have been absolutely devastating.
They were watching the world they built dissolve into an empire of silk and gold.
The text captures the profound weight of that emotional devastation in the deathbed scene of Amr bin al-As, recorded in Sahih Muslim 321.
Amr was a complex figure, a brilliant tactician who had aligned himself with Muawiyah and secured the province of Egypt for the Umayyads. Yet as his death approaches, the political victories ring hollow.
The Hadith describes Ammar turning his face to the wall and weeping uncontrollably. His son tries to comfort him, but Ammar is overwhelmed by a deeply critical life review. He divides his life into three distinct phases, and the trajectory terrifies him.
He describes his first phase as a pagan enemy of Islam. He admits he hated the Prophet more than anyone else and wished he could have killed him. He notes that had he died in that state, he would undoubtedly be in the fire.
He describes his second phase, his conversion in time, as a devoted companion. He says he loved the Prophet so intensely and held him in such awe that he couldn't even look him fully in the eye. He states that had he died during that period, he had strong hopes for paradise.
But then he describes the third phase, the era of the civil wars and the resulting kingship.
Yes. He says, "Then we were appointed to matters, and I do not know what my status is regarding them."
He is paralyzed by the fear of facing God. All the political compromises the wealthy accumulated, the civil strike he participated in to help build this new kingdom, he suddenly realizes none of it holds any spiritual value, and it may in fact be his ruin.
It is a haunting portrait of the cost of empire. We have meticulously traced the timeline. The 30-year clock began. Umar's assassination broke the door, holding back the turmoil. The internal fractures under Uthman widened the cracks.
Civil wars at Jamal and Siffin bathed the community in blood. The Kharijites violently splintered the theological landscape. State propaganda attempted to erase Ali. The laws of economics and austerity were rewritten for the new monarchy.
This brings us to the final act, the direct historical catalyst for the tragedy of Karbala. To halt the catastrophic, endless bloodshed of the civil wars, Ali's eldest son, Hassan, makes an unimaginable sacrifice.
He steps down from his legitimate position and hands the reins of power to Muawiyah.
The research paper is highly protective of Hassan's legacy here. It insists that his abdication was not a surrender born of weakness or cowardice.
Rather, it was the deliberate fulfillment of yet another specific prophetic prophecy. The text cites Sahih Bukhari 2704, where the Prophet, pointing at a young Hassan, announced to the congregation, "This son of mine is a leader, and through him Allah will reconcile two great factions of Muslims."
Hassan was acting as the prophesied peacemaker. But Hassan did not simply walk away and leave the community to the wolves. He viewed this transition as a temporary mechanism to restore the constitutional order of the state.
He placed incredibly strict, legally binding conditions on this treaty with Muawiyah.
The conditions of the treaty, corroborated by the historical texts referenced alongside the hadiths in the paper, were paramount.
Hassan stipulated that Muawiyah must govern strictly by the Quran and the authentic Sunnah. He demanded an immediate end to the state-sponsored cursing of Ali from the pulpits.
And, most crucially for the future of the empire, he demanded that Muawiyah would not establish a hereditary dynasty.
The treaty explicitly stated that upon Muawiyah's death, the power to choose the next leader had to be returned to a shura, a consultative council of the community, just as Umar had established decades earlier.
Hassan sacrifices his own power, his own rightful claim, to hit the reset button. He absorbs the political loss to ensure that the community can return to the prophetic model of consultation.
But instead of an era of restored principles, we get the tragic, horrific climax of Hassan's life.
Hassan is poisoned.
The text draws upon the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba, 38514, to detail his agonizing death. The physiological detail provided is visceral.
Hassan tells an inquiring visitor that he has survived being poisoned multiple times before, but this final lethal dose is so utterly severe that he has just spit up pieces of his own internal organs, specifically his liver.
When his younger brother Hussein arrives and sees the agony Hassan is in, Hussein is consumed by fury. He demands that Hassan name the person he suspects of poisoning him, ready to exact immediate, violent revenge.
But Hassan's final act on earth is one of astonishing, almost incomprehensible restraint. He flatly refuses to name his prime suspect.
He tells Hussein, "If it is the one I suspect, Allah is more severe in taking revenge. And if it is not, I do not want an innocent person killed because of me."
Hassan takes the secret of his murderer to the grave, prioritizing the fragile peace of the community over his own demand for justice. He refuses to let his death become the spark for another civil war.
But the peace Hassan died to protect does not survive. The paper concludes its timeline analysis by pointing to the shattering aftermath of Hassan's death. With the prophesied peacemaker gone, Muawiyah blatantly violates the most critical foundational condition of the treaty.
Muawiyah breaks the covenant. He ignores the mandate to return power to the Shura, and instead he appoints his own son, Yazeed, as his successor.
He solidifies the hereditary dynasty. He permanently destroys the mechanism of consultation.
Exactly. The concept of the Shura is annihilated. The 30-year caliphate is truly dead, and the era of dynastic kingship is cemented as the permanent reality of the Islamic world.
And this specific broken promise, this ultimate betrayal of Hassan's treaty, is the direct historical background.
It is the catalyst that leaves Hassan's brother Hussein with absolutely no choice but to make his fateful stand against Yazid's illegitimate rule on the plains of Karbala. The text also notes a narration from Abdullah bin Masud confirming this and adding that their father, Ali, holds an even higher heavenly status.
There's a profound theme of divine protection and overwhelming affection surrounding Hussein from his earliest days.
The affection the Prophet showed his grandsons was unprecedented and publicly visible.
Sayyidina Abdullah bin Abbas reported that the Prophet would constantly seek Allah's protection for Hassan and Hussein. He would use the exact same complete words of refuge that the Prophet Ibrahim used to protect his sons, Ismail and Ishaq, seeking refuge in the perfect words of Allah from every devil, every poisonous creature, and every harmful evil eye.
There's a beautiful, intimate narration regarding Sayyidina Usama bin Zayd that illustrates this love.
Yes, Usama bin Zayd recalls seeing the Prophet walking at night, carrying something hidden beneath his cloak. When Usama inquired and the Prophet opened the cloak, it was Hassan and Hussein tucked inside.
The Prophet then prayed, declaring, "These are my sons and my daughter's sons. O Allah, I love them, so love them, and love whoever loves them."
The paper also includes the explicit foundational statement of the Prophet regarding their deep spiritual connection. Hussein is from me, and I am from Hussein. May Allah love the person who loves Hussein.
The sources show the Prophet prioritizing his love for them, even over the strictest religious rituals.
Indeed. The text highlights a moment where the Prophet was delivering a formal sermon from the pulpit. He saw young Hassan and Hussein walking into the mosque, wearing red shirts, stumbling as toddlers do.
The Prophet actually interrupted his sermon, descended from the pulpit, picked up the boys, and carried them.
He remarked to the congregation that Allah spoke the truth when he said us at home. He said wealth and children are a trial, explaining that he simply could not bear to see them stumble.
And there's the famous incident during the congregational prayer.
Correct. The Prophet was leading the prayer and went into prostration. But he remained in prostration for an unusually long time. The companions were worried, thinking perhaps a revelation was descending.
When the prayer finished, the Prophet explained that his grandson had climbed onto his blessed back, and he deliberately delayed raising his head because he did not want to rush the child and interrupt his play.
That deep protective love makes the subsequent prophecies of Karbala all the more agonizing. The Prophet knew what was coming. The document traces the prophecy of Hussein's martyrdom back to the era of the civil wars.
The text relates a haunting moment during Ali's journey to the Battle of Siffin. As Ali's army passed near the banks of the Euphrates River at a place called Nainawa, Ali began to weep bitterly.
He revealed to his companions that he had once walked in on the Prophet crying. When Ali had asked the Prophet why he was in tears, the Prophet explained that the angel Jibreel had just informed him that his grandson Hussein would be killed near the Euphrates River.
Jibreel had even brought a handful of the soil from that exact location to show the Prophet.
To hold the dirt in your hand where your beloved grandson will be slaughtered, it's an unimaginable burden. The text validates Hussein's eventual stand by defining the supreme nature of his martyrdom.
The paper quotes a hadith establishing the hierarchy of martyrs. It states that alongside Hamza, the Prophet's uncle who died at Uhud, the master of martyrs is a person who stands up to an oppressive, tyrannical ruler, speaks the truth to enjoin good and forbid evil, and is killed for it.
Hussein's stand against Yazid's illegitimate dynasty is the ultimate manifestation of this hadith.
And the timeline concludes on the actual day of Karbala, the 10th of Muharram, 61 AH, with a final, devastating vision.
Sayyidina Abdullah bin Abbas, who we earlier saw brilliantly debating the Kharijites, reports a dream he had exactly at noon on the day of Ashura.
In the dream, he saw the Prophet looking disheveled, covered in dust, and holding a glass bottle filled with blood.
When Ibn Abbas asked about it, the Prophet replied, "This is the blood of Hussein and his companions, which I've been collecting since morning."
It is a cosmic tragedy. To solidify the theological stakes of who was slaughtered on that day, the paper references the event of the cloak, the al-Qisa.
Salama narrated that when Sayyidah Fatima brought food to the Prophet, he called for Ali, Hassan, and Hussein. He wrapped all of them, along with himself, tightly under his Khaybari cloak, and recited the Quranic verse of purification, asking Allah to remove all impurity from his al-Bayt.
That was the family whose blood was spilled on the plains of Karbala. It's all connected. The ticking clock of the 30 years, the broken door of Umar, the internal administrative fractures under Uthman, the bloody civil wars, the emergence of extremist splinters.
The state-sponsored propaganda to erase history, the alteration of economic and religious laws to fund a luxurious empire.
And finally, the broken treaty that destroyed the consultative shura, forcing the grandson of the prophet to stand alone against the machinery of a hereditary kingdom.
This deep dive proves that Karbala did not happen in a vacuum. It was the horrific, inevitable collision at the end of a 3-decade erosion of prophetic principles.
The rigorous methodology of this text proves that you do not need unverified folklore or modern sectarian myths to comprehend the gravity of Karbala. The authenticated statements of the prophet and the meticulously documented actions of the companions themselves provide the most damning, clear-eyed view of how a system of divine justice was slowly dismantled and replaced by the ruthless machinery of kingship.
Which leaves us with a lingering, deeply provocative question to mull over. When the moral compass of a society's founding generation clashes head-on with the pragmatic, power-hungry mechanisms of a rising empire, what happens to the truth?
Does it get permanently rewritten by the victors who control the pulpits and the economy? Or does it survive in the quiet, dangerous defiance of those who refuse to forget?
It survives in the intellectual rigor of an Ibn Abbas debating extremists. It survives in the unyielding courage of a Muqaddam confronting a king about his silk and gold.
And ultimately, it survives in the blood of a Hussein standing on the plains of Karbala, choosing annihilation over the validation of an unjust empire.
The diagnostic landscape of history might be murky, but as these sources show, the fractures in the foundation are undeniably real.
Thank you for joining us on this rigorous historical journey.